everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this video, Mark Moss and Peter McCormack's conversation revolves around the concept of Bitcoin and its place in the financial world, with a focus on the difference between finite and infinite games. Mark emphasizes that many people approach Bitcoin and investments with a finite mindset, focusing on entry and exit points. Instead, the conversation suggests adopting an infinite mindset where the goal is to accumulate and hold assets like Bitcoin indefinitely, rather than selling for fiat currency. Mark Moss uses the analogy of finite versus infinite games is used to explain this concept, highlighting how infinite games, such as business and marriage, have no defined endpoints and are about longevity and continuous play. The conversation also touches on the notion that the financial system is rigged, with inflation and taxes working against wealth accumulation, but Mark suggests that understanding and playing by these rules can allow one to build and preserve wealth effectively.
I actually think this might be one of the most important shows we make at the moment. I'll tell you why. This is my third real bull cycle. I've still got friends every cycle. They haven't done shit. They haven't got involved.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's it's already going bananas. It's going to get more bananas. I think people are thinking about Bitcoin wrong from the outside when they haven't been in. I think I know what they're thinking, because you know the question, you get the text, am I too late?
Yeah.
What price are you selling at? And I think people keep thinking about entry and exit price when they should just be thinking about entry and staying. That's it.
That's it. It's the infinite game.
The infinite game.
The infinite game.
Tell me about the infinite game.
The infinite game is a game, the infinite game is contrasted against a finite game. So a finite game would be a game that would have a clearly defined objective of the game. It would have defined players of the game, and it would have a time frame. So your soccer club plays in finite games, basketball, football, etc., right? An infinite game is different in a sense where it doesn't have a defined objective, nor does it have defined players, and nor does it have a defined time frame. And so an example of a finite game, we already gave that, right? So like sports, for example. Infinite game would be the game of business or the game of marriage. I've been married for over 20 years. The goal is to not end my marriage. Right? So we're not playing against each other. We're not competing, and there's no outcome. The outcome is just to stay as long as we can. Same with that. This concept was written about by an 80s theologian in a book called Infinite versus Finite Games, and then Simon Sinek, a best-selling author. I think he has the best performing TED Talk ever on this topic, and he uses an example of when the U.S. went to Vietnam. And the U.S. went to Vietnam to fight that war, but the U.S. went in with a finite mindset. We're going to go in. We're defined players, the U.S. versus the Viet Cong. We have a defined time frame, and our goal is to win the war. That's a finite game. But the Viet Cong were playing an infinite game. That was their land, and their goal was not to die, and they were going to stay there forever. And the mismatch of time frames led to a mismatch in strategy, and then the U.S. lost that war. As a matter of fact, the U.S. has lost every war since Vietnam, which is a whole different story. But that's sort of the idea of the infinite game versus the finite game. And
that exists in money.
It exists all over. So there's all types of infinite games and finite games that we play all the time. Ultimately, I think the framework that I would use, obviously it fits into businesses, and Simon Sinek wrote about it for businesses. Business should think about the goal of staying in business forever, not like today we have CEOs that are trying to just make numbers for this quarter. Hey, I'm gonna lay off a whole bunch of people so I can get the numbers up for this quarter so I can get my bonus. So CEOs are playing finite game. So he wrote about it in business, but I think it fits in the context of money, because fiat is a finite game, but wealth is an infinite game. And so how does this tie back into Bitcoin and what I call the game of money? And it starts off with just a simple question, which you get asked all the time, and you're probably getting asked a lot more recently as Bitcoin has shot up to over 70,000, which is, at what price are you going to sell your Bitcoin? If I had a Bitcoin for every time I've been asked that question, right?
Pete asked me this question on the podcast with Checkmate. I'd said essentially never, didn't I?
Yeah. I mean, mine's essentially never, unless there was some like super weird spike up to just a ridiculous price. And you're like, shit, just sell 2 or 3.
It's what you're selling it for, isn't it? Like if there's something that you want for your family or for you, like.
So that's the thing. Okay, so there's 2 pieces into that. So first of all, when somebody asks that question, which I get asked all the time, at what price are you going to sell? What's your number? What's your wealth number? Like people might ask like a billionaire, what's your number? Mark, how long are you going to work? How much money do you need? What's your number? Like at what point would you have FU money and quit? Is there ever enough people I can help? is there ever enough churches I could build or homes I could build? Is there ever enough I could do for other people? So like, it just shows where your motives are. But let's go back to the question at hand. So at what price would I sell my Bitcoin? When I hear that question, I just realized that you have no idea the game that we're actually playing. You see, if I came over to your house and I brought a board game and I'm like, hey, Peter, let's play this game. And you're like, cool, what is it? Well, what's the objective of the game? What are the rules of the game? What are the in-game mechanisms? Who are the players of the game? And we have to define all these things. But if you don't know the game we're playing, like, how are you even going to play it, first of all? So most people have no idea the game that we're playing.
Well, I'm going to say your quote, because poor people feel the game of money is rigged against them. Wealthy people realize the game is rigged and learn how to play the game.
I love that one. Yeah. So let's talk about that. So okay, we'll just jump right into the deep end on that. So in that, there's two things in that tweet and that quote that I put out. One, which is, too many people today have this victim mentality. They realize the game is rigged against them, so why even bother? And I see it all the time. I'm sure you see it all the time, right? It's like, why even bother? The WEF is going to control us. They're going to make us do these things. They're stealing our money. I can't get ahead, blah, 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 right?
Pure nihilism, throw our money into dog coins.
Yeah, it's rigged against us. Why even bother? Whereas the rich realize the game is rigged and how to play. So for example, I told my wife, I couldn't imagine living under like a communist regime like China. But even in China, there's plenty of rich people. Like, plenty of wealthy people who still send their kids to college in the United States and still buy property. Like, why couldn't I be one of those people in China? Even you go to Argentina or Venezuela, there's still rich people in Argentina and Venezuela. So it's like, you can learn how to play the rigged game, right? Now, how is the game rigged? Well, let's define what the game is first, and then we'll talk about how it's rigged and how we can play that. So if we define the game, and Michael Saylor talks about like, when are you going to sell your Bitcoin, Laura? Never, right? And so when someone says, when are you going to sell your Bitcoin? The answer is never. And the reason why is because the goal of the game is to build wealth. Now, side note here, there's way higher things in life than just building wealth. But we're talking about the game of building wealth. So I'm not saying that all of life is about building wealth. There's way bigger things.
No, but like there's a reality. Like,
right. So, but in this game of building wealth, right? So the goal is to create value by solving people's problems, to earn money, and then taking that money to buy assets. And the goal is that my assets, I should be looking at them on, preferably a monthly basis, my balance sheet, my assets minus my liabilities, I call it my scorecard, and then making sure those assets are going up over time. And then hopefully those assets go to my kids who continue to build and my grandkids and so forth. This is what the Rockefellers and all the rich families have done. So if the game is to get assets, then we have to understand, okay, then what are the rules of the game? What are the objectives of the game? Who are the players? So they're inside the game, just like most games. As I go around the board, I have to pay taxes. So I have to pay the $200 on the Monopoly or whatever, right? So there's things that are stealing my wealth and ways to increase my wealth. So in the game, there's taxes that takes my wealth, and there's inflation. So the game is rigged against us because of those two things. So inflation is stealing it and taxes is stealing it as I'm trying to build my wealth. Then we have, the government, the regulators that are changing the rules all the time on us. We have Wall Street that are sort of betting against us. We have the banks who, in the Bitcoin community, we look at inflation and banks sort of as like opponents as opposed to actually they're our teammates. And so that's sort of what the game is. So the objective is to build assets and continue to build wealth through assets. Not sell assets for fiat currency, take fiat currency to buy assets. And so back to the question, when we say your Bitcoin, why would I ever sell my Bitcoin for dollars? The goal is to turn dollars to Bitcoin. A perfect example of this is highlighted in the book When Money Dies, when they talked about the hyperinflation Weimar Republic. And how, I'm sure you guys have seen the chart, and you can put it in the editing, but the chart of the mark to gold, right? It was like a hockey stick, but then you overlay it with the volatility and it went up like crazy, right? And so as you were living through that, you saw your asset prices go super high and then crash. Oh my gosh, well, they went high again and then they crashed. And then they went high again and then they crashed. And then went high and said, okay, I'm gonna sell now before they crash again. And at the end, they ended up holding a bunch of worthless paper that they burned in the fireplace because it was worth less than wood was. Right? And so the goal is to get the assets, not that. Okay, then we understand that there's these mechanisms in the game that are stealing our wealth, which is inflation and taxes. So let's talk about those two things. Let's start with the inflation first. So the game is rigged against us because the government is using inflation, which is theft. Breedlove hits that point all the time. Inflation is theft. We agree, right? The $100,000 in my account today, in 10 years from now is still 100,000 currency units, but it buys me $70,000 worth of value or goods and services. So they've stole my value out of that. The game is rigged against me. They're secretly confiscating my wealth, and I have no say in that. Great. Why do they do that?
Are you asking me why?
Yeah. Why does the government want inflation?
Oh, because to pay off their debts.
Great. So if they're paying off their debts, then does that mean they also pay off my debts?
Nope.
Why not?
Well, it depends. I mean, if I guess with inflation, if your debts are fiat denominated, then of course. But it doesn't work out.
Okay, let me.
No, I know what you're saying. It's because, but my wages have to go up as well. If my wages aren't going up with inflation, it may be that I still got to pay the nominal.
That's not true. That's not true.
Why? So I still got to pay off the nominal value.
Okay, so what happens is now, you're not from the United States, so you don't have the advantage we have. We have 30-year fixed mortgages.
Yes.
So what I can do is I can buy a property, which I did. I bought a couple of them at like 3% rates, and I fixed it for 30 years. So my payment is fixed. Let's just use a number of $1,000. That payment is fixed for $1,000. In 10 years from now, my payment is still $1,000. But yet the purchasing power, I'll be paying that back with like $400 worth to pay the $1,000. In 20 years, it's like costing me $200. Even if my wages don't really go up, it's the cost of the dollar is losing value.
Because you're playing the game.
Because I'm playing the game.
Yeah.
So number one, the game is rigged against us. They're using inflation to steal our wealth from us. But why are they doing that is because they're trying to inflate away their debt. But that means that if I have debt, they're also inflating away my debt.
From this conversation, we learned that adopting an infinite mindset in investments, particularly with Bitcoin, is crucial for long-term wealth accumulation. This involves focusing on holding valuable assets indefinitely rather than seeking short-term gains, understanding how inflation and taxes erode wealth, and leveraging the financial system's rules to one's advantage. The discussion highlights the importance of viewing money and investments through a long-term lens, recognizing Bitcoin as a superior store of value resistant to inflation, and taking personal responsibility for financial education and informed decision-making. So what do you think about this conversation? Do you agree with Mark's arguments and point of view? Also, did you learn anything new from this interesting conversation? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, keep learning and keep stacking.